Hello and welcome. I'm Daniel Bishop, and I'm going to talk to you about a shift project we did, which was the transition of housing uh, for a rural community in southern Ruapehu. So we worked with a few people in this. Uh, we worked closely with the Ngati Rangi Iwi, and my supervisor was Professor Susan Krumdieck, who you may know. We also worked with Graham Mould, who's a renowned log home builder, and we're really appreciative for all these people's involvement and many more stakeholders actually while we were in Ruapehu. Team wasn't just me, there were a few other people involved, Ryland Martin and Michael Long. And the bulk of this work was done in 2015, but the project's been ticking over since then. So firstly, I will kind of zoom to southern Ruapehu. There's three towns, Waihuru, Ratahi, and Owakuni, and most people will be familiar with Owakuni, the big carrot, and of course, all sitting south of Mount Ruapehu. So for those who don't know, it's known as a tourist town. It's a tourist town, particularly for skiing. 4 months of the year, the population explodes as people rush in and rent holiday homes to go skiing. And of course, this leads to a number of problems. And while we're on this slide, just have a look. Median income in Ratahi, Owakuni, Waihuru. So Owakuni, 24,000 a year. Ratahi, 19,000 a year median income. So things aren't going terribly well. And of course, there's some wicked problems. The 30 to 40% underemployment. People get employment where they can, obviously seasonally. When the ski season kicks up, they'll rush in and get as much work as they can. And also harvesting the carrots, they'll do work there. But a lot of the time, there's nothing. So there's a lot of people really eager for meaningful work. Because it's a tourist economy, there's homes everywhere, but most of them are actually unoccupied most of the year. They're holiday homes. People rush in to rent them during the ski season. Off season, they sit unoccupied. And actually, a lot of the locals, in their contract, they'll lose accommodation over that period because the landlords can make more money renting at some ridiculous rate, $100, $200 a day for tourists. One of the big ones is the peak power demand that comes in. So when everybody flocks for the ski season, causes a huge increase in peak power, and it's way over capacity for what this area can support. That they get slapped with fines. The lines company gets slapped with fines for this, and that actually gets passed on largely to the locals because they're the ones paying the costs that normalize throughout the year. So they have incredibly high power rates. So it's really surprising to see, actually. You see some of their statements and you think, how are they paying more than me for less? So because of the way that economy works, about 25% of the residents can't afford to pay their rates. And you can see that the effects of that in the area. One of the biggest things, and really the thing that attracted our attention, 40% of the children will be hospitalized once per year, at least once per year, for a serious respiratory illness. So that could be asthma or pneumonia or some sort of bacterial infection. And really the cause is substandard housing. So we need warm, healthy, sustainable homes for this region. Now, why these are wicked problems? Because what's happening at the moment does work. Barely, but it works. And so because it works, it's just kind of ticking along, it's staying, but nothing's getting better. So it's a big pitch, which I'm going to lay out for you over the next few slides. We went there and we saw a potential for a transition engineering shift project. Now that is sustainable log homes for the region, and that's using local resources, local labor, it feeding into the local economy as much as possible. And not just any log home, but we want it to work as much as possible with the local people to see what would a Ruapehu, what would a New Zealand log home look like? And I think we found it. So why log homes? Most of you may not be familiar with them, but they're incredibly healthy. They've got good insulation values, and those thick walls have a lot of thermal mass. If you ever get the chance to go into one of these homes, when you walk in, there's a feeling. What I know as an engineer is the radiative heat transfer. It has a certain feeling, just like if you walk into a cave, they feel a certain way. It's that large, those huge thermal mass in the walls, but you're walking into a warm cave and you feel secure in them because they're these strong, hefty, thick-walled buildings. It's quite a feeling. They are affordable, despite maybe popular opinion. Most of the time when you see log homes, you will see log mansions, people specifically seeking out to make this very impressive house. But just the general costs are actually quite low. They're very labor intensive. So when you are spending money on a log home, you're spending money on the craftsmanship, the thinking, the smart use of resources that go into it. You're not spending it on stuff. Log homes use less fasteners. They won't use cladding, the cladding of the logs, the internal jib. Instead, you have logs. So they use a whole lot less stuff. And the stuff that is used is all from the local economy. It's all from the local area. And unlike many countries, New Zealand, we have a wealth of timber. we have it everywhere. So we're well suited. And these buildings last. So there's so many examples. Here's 700-year-old wood homes and businesses in Korea, and not just Korea, all across the world. 600-year-old wood structures in Germany. They just stand up. So as I said before, we wanted to find what would be a unique, identifiable log home for this area. So we came up with Te Whare Ahuru design, and that was with working with the Ngati Rangi, talking, understanding what they want in a house, not what's been given to them, but what would they seek out. And we found out there's some things that are really important. Some things were kind of surprising. So a side entrance, and before you enter the house, a place to wash your hands, a place to do wet work. That was really important. And also a generous and deep porch. Right, so these stood out as really important things. And one of the characteristic pieces, which is kind of really beautiful about this project, is they identified a particular roof pitch. And it's the roof pitch that actually mirrors Mount Ruapehu. And when you see images of this log home or plans of this log home, you think, no, that's nowhere else. That's just here. That's really uniquely New Zealand. So I think we succeeded in actually, it's a home that you could look at and you could think, that's us. So we had architectural plans done for these. We worked with people who know about log home building. There's not a lot of them. So Jess Patterson worked on these. We did plans for a large family home. So 4-bedroom, 150 meters square, 2-story. It's easy to go 2-story in a log home. But also a granny flat. And that was once again by consultation, understanding what people wanted these homes for. Flexible, adaptable. So big spaces that you could use in many ways that could accommodate a lot of people when you need it, and not many at other times. And of course, all of them are heated with a pellet burner. So once again, there was that characteristic roof angle and really beautiful front porch. Large overhangs. The overhangs become important. We talk a bit more about them later. And it was important for us to not just look at this as an abstract, there you go, here's a sustainable house, but something that made sense in the area for the people. So, we see this, and we did a bit of commercial research around this as an industry for the area. We know people who are very invested and interested in the land. They've done a lot of they do a lot of work with it, who know what's around. There's forestry around Ruapehu as well. We visited the forestry there. So a business that builds these houses for the local area, but also for the rest of New Zealand, where you can ingrain, you can build the skill set and the craftsmanship required to build these handcrafted homes. And I had experience of building one of them. So there's a lot that goes into it. You've got to think, and you're not working with a linear Cartesian material. You're working with a tree, and every tree is different. And you can't use every tree too. I won't get into that. So a local business working with the local people and building local jobs. And of course, being engineers, we had to do some engineering. We wanted this to be passive. And one of the ways is how you design those overhangs, how you design those windows. If you put windows in the right place, man, you can radically transform your building. So in winter, you want as much sun as possible. You want to warm the space up. And then in summer, you can use those overhangs to shield your building. So you don't actually need the cooling. If you do this sort of design right, you cut your bills and you cut the amount of heating and cooling you need radically. Are they insulated enough? We did some modeling and some extra research on it. People might think of log homes as having infiltration, but no, properly made log homes, you couldn't slide a piece of paper between the joints. They seal up. They do that by scribing the profile of one log onto another. So when they seal, and when they settle to tighten the gaps between the logs. So we did some work on that. We found that they're sufficiently insulating with even reasonably small logs for the New Zealand standard. And on top of that, and the really cool, well, I think really cool part of these is thermal mass. So thermal mass, energy storage, thermal storage works to moderate the temperatures inside over time. That the mass as well moderates the humidity. So you get these really consistent, really comfortable environments. It also can work to defer your peaks. So when you're in a log home or a building with a lot of mass, the walls aren't seeing the outside temperature at that time of day. It's actually seeing it from a little bit earlier. So that heating you had during midday actually gets stretched out into the evening, and it defers that peak, which is really good for peak loading. So here's some images of we built a log shell, and you can see how custom it is. Every log is scribed to the other, so you don't have these straight lines. You have quite a profile. We use chainsaws to cut those out, and done well, these things sit together so tightly. Moisture control. Leaky homes, eh? Everybody's terrified of leaky homes, and the answer, one of the answers, well, we had to leaky homes was to treat timber, which, hey, you can do. But there's other ways to prevent something from rotting, and that's to make sure it doesn't get wet. And if it gets wet, allow it to dry and to drain. So that knowledge, that traditional knowledge in log craftsmanship has been brought forward. That's why if you look at a log home, you will always see overhangs, eaves. You can design these homes so they don't actually get wet. There's other things you can do, traditional preservatives, oil and mineral compounds, natural oil and mineral compounds you can stain the houses with, and they work well. You can see that these buildings last for, well, hundreds of years, you've seen. So we worked out some costs, the cost to build for 100 meters square, and that's not including the internal fit out, about 75,000. So about comparable with what you'd expect for, or actually a little cheaper than what you'd expect by conventional building methods. So going forward, what we had was well received. I think everybody really liked people going and caring about a region. We've prepared the architecture, and we've done some testing on an actual structure. So really what's left is if somebody wants to step forward and steward the project forward, it's primed for it, and reach out and you'd be welcomed. But as going through this process, there are some research questions as well. So one of them is, there are international standards for log home design. That doesn't mean your local council knows them. So translating what that wisdom, that knowledge that's been developed and accepted in other places to a package that councils feel comfortable certifying. There is some work to do there. And man, there was this big potential opened up around radiata pine. So we've radiata pine coming out of our ears. We typically view it as a very low quality timber. Either you need to treat it a lot, or it goes into making pulp, making paper. So very low value. But we could be sitting on a gold mine if there are ways, and particularly these design ways, where you can use it in a building where it's appropriately designed, it has enough eaves, water's not getting on it, with these natural preservatives. If there and you kiln dry the logs as is to stop them experiencing the conditions at which they would have lower durability. If we can use radiata pine for these sort of projects, we are sitting on a gold mine. We've turned what we look at as a very low value resource into something incredibly valuable. So we do have some questions going forward. So I hope you enjoyed it. That was the shift project of transitional housing in southern Ruapehu. Thank you.